one thing that we have talked about a lot in the past on our older podcasts, but it's just like the corporatization of the gaming industry. It's more homogenized.
We'll get a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We need this audience, so we're going to take a little bit of the RPG elements into our game. We need this audience, so we're going to take a little bit of these elements and these characters. And
the pressure to become a publicly traded corporation comes around, and as soon as that happens, it's almost like clockwork.
Yeah,
the way that it just starts falling apart. The pressure to continually grow forever, every year, till the end of time, is what has put us where we're at. I'm not any longer as sort of, I don't know, into or really paying a lot of attention to gaming news. It's been like maybe the last 2 years, I want to say, where I feel like totally out of the loop on everything. I don't really check on it anymore.
Yeah, me too. And this is how I am with movies as well. Like, I really just don't know what's happening.
Yes, exactly. We used to be way into that.
It's a good place to be, actually, in my opinion.
I agree.
To not really be aware of any of this.
It's a totally different perspective. I remember earlier on, maybe probably when we very first started our original Dark Pixel podcast, like in 2016 or 15 or whatever 16, it was, where we would talk about things and talk about like the general gaming audience versus like us, right? Who are part of the inner sanctum of like real gamers, right?
Yeah, card carrying.
And I would actually say, like, at this point, even despite the fact that we continue to have a gaming podcast, I feel like I'm almost like maybe all the way into that audience now where I'm not as informed as I used to be.
Right.
And part of that is being busy. Part of it is just not caring as much anymore.
There you go.
So when I do see like a piece of news and I see outrage over things or people freaking out about it, I have a totally different perspective on it that makes me feel like really old.
Yeah, of course.
Like really old, because not only does it seem so trivial and just like not to matter, and it doesn't feel like it was that long ago that it did. But also, I remember when we were growing up and like the culture around video games at that time versus kind of how it is now, and it just makes me feel so left behind. It feels so different. It's almost unrecognizable at times. I mean, there's still, of course, certain things. I mean, somehow, I don't know how, console wars is still a thing. So
Xbox just had some interesting news. I was plugged in enough to know about that.
That is what I was actually kind of referencing, was that apparently certain Xbox exclusives are now going to be
PS5
on PS5, and there's even some speculation about some could come to Switch or the next Switch console or whatever. And just the firestorm of like people that care at all about this. It made me sort of reflect on the cultural differences and how different it is, largely because of how far the internet has come. So we would have been
more aware of what other people have.
Yes. Not only that, but like there are a lot of things that are a lot easier to fact check. Like I can't even imagine some of the hoaxes and gaming rumors that we had during our time having like any life today. Right?
Yeah, they get shot down so fast.
You could, because it's not only just the fact that there are so many like much more legitimate sources where you can get your information from. There's a lot more developers doing like interviews. People are more interested in like the development process and following the creators and getting their thoughts on things, and you can reach them easier. Like, okay, that's for wild. Instance, that's and insane. I'm actually going to release a video on this. The creator of the Suikoden series died just like this last week.
I did not know that.
And so their new game, Eoden Chronicle, which was supposed to be like a Suikoden successor, hasn't even released yet. It's like a couple months away.
Okay.
And so it was a really, really sad thing, but it made me reflect on the fact that I just emailed the guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I just emailed him and was like, hey, there's this rumor that Suikoden 2, the story of Suikoden 2, was actually, you actually thought of that story before the first game, but that it was so ambitious and like you wanted to do this game first to kind of lead into it.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to that rumor? And he's like, no.
Okay.
Right? Like, I feel like because of social media exists, I was able to find his email address and actually ask him, is this true or not?
And within very small time frame,
like the next day, he emails me back with an answer to a bunch of questions I had, and that rumor was debunked like that.
Wow.
But that rumor had existed for, I don't know, probably like 20 years, and no one thought to just email and ask the guy.
Because we're all from the 90s.
I know, because we all just sort of like, okay, it's on
older,
Wikipedia. Like, there's no source there to click on to check.
Right.
Which is what you should be doing.
Right.
But anyway, it's much easier.
Is your email a source now? Like, how are you going to turn that into a source?
It is.
It is?
The Wikipedia has been updated with my video as a source.
Oh, sick. How about
because
that? There you go.
I have his email, and I have it in a document, like a Google document people can look at.
Okay,
so they can go check it.
So
and
you had to include the email in something else, and then that thing.
So it's in the description, and people can click and actually read it for themselves. Read not only the Japanese, but also the translation underneath it.
Cool. That's awesome.
But in any case, it was like, I was able to, I had questions, I had doubts about this rumor.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm making this Suikoden 2 retrospective.
Right.
So I'm going to actually find out if this is true or not. Because that rang so many alarm bells to me.
Yeah.
That just seems so wrong based on everything I knew about how games were made during our growing up period and how fast they came together and stuff. Is like, that just doesn't seem right. But in 1999 or whenever that game came out, I think, I don't know if I could have just found Moriyama's email and just like
you
sent
could
him.
have written him a letter, and I wonder if it would have been a while and it would have cost more money.
Yeah.
But you would have maybe gotten a response, maybe not.
Here's what I wouldn't have been able to do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to communicate with Hion, who could translate my questions and send it in Japanese.
You're right. You couldn't have done that
I
in the
could
90s.
not have possibly communicated with him because I would have had nobody that I knew
who knew
Japanese.
And
would have been able to translate that letter, and then if I even got a letter back, translate it back into English for me.
Yeah.
So the internet has... The internet today makes it way, way easier. On top of the fact that data mining is like a really kind of big thing now. People actually go into the game's code, and they can actually confirm or deny whether or not this rumor that if there's an area for in Zelda Ocarina of Time, the Light Temple, like if you can actually go there,
if that's a place,
if that's even in the game, it's code, right? So because of that, I think it's much harder to create like a gaming hoax now that is convincing.
Yeah.
Like a lot of what we grew up with, which was crazy.
Well, also these like young kids back in the day, you just had each other to talk to.
Yeah.
But nowadays a young kid will follow a gamer who's like in his 30s, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like doesn't fall for that stuff. And
that's a very good point.
And you can be on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and all that stuff, and you can be around like older, more mature people, and then you can like, I don't know, it almost takes some of the fun out of it now that I'm thinking about it. Like these young kids, instead of being all creative, they have these older adults telling them, "No, that's stupid," you know, and instead of being free to maybe carelessly be extra creative with their favorite game, you know?
Yeah. This kind of reminds me of that. I forget what they call it. There's a certain like principle to it where if you have just like a few people guessing, say at how many marbles are in a jar or something like that, or pieces of candy or whatever, you're going to get these wildly varied, very wrong
It's called the wisdom
answers.
of the crowds.
Yes, wisdom of the crowds. That's exactly what I'm thinking
I'm aware of this, yeah.
But like the larger you make that crowd of people guessing,
the average
gets really close. It becomes very accurate.
Yes, yeah.
And so there's a certain principle of that I feel also contributes to this, because our gaming communities are now way bigger.
Yeah, it's not like you and your friends.
No.
Like back then, the best you could hope for as to having a more mature person debunk your like theories or hoaxes, right, is like your older brother.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, my older brother said nuh-uh, and that's how it went. That's the 90s in a nutshell. Is my older brother said nuh-uh. That's the 90s. But nowadays, everybody can follow these older people who will engage with them in some way or other. But yeah, also at the same time, that idea right there. I wonder if for kids, though, I wonder if there's like some age limit though to where the wisdom of crowds starts to like kind of kick in.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right too, because they follow influencers, and those influencers often have direct ties to be able to talk to developers and stuff.
There were no influencers before.
Not at all.
That wasn't a thing. It was your older brother. That was your
older brother
best,
was
most
your
reliable
influencer.
He was your most reliable influencer.
Or maybe like a babysitter or something like that too.
Or a baby. Oh, that's right. I had a few that.
So like when I was growing up, we had this kid who would come over when my parents wanted to go out.
Yeah.
He was probably, I don't know, I'd say 15, 16. He seemed really old and cool to me at the time.
At the time, yeah.
But like he was the one who helped us beat Super Mario Brothers 3, for example. I would have never seen the end of that game without him showing me the secrets. You can come and get the whistle, and you can like skip worlds. Like what? That like blew my mind. Like, holy crap! How did you know that?
Well, I had a babysitter who would bring over his game genie.
Oh,
He'd bring over his game genie, and funny
cheats.
enough, that was a thing, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, I don't know, but at the time, it's like you get that game genie, and we would have just the wildest experiences in our games. And he also had like a turbo controller, like an SNES, but it had the little turbo mode where you can like double press a button like a billion
really
times.
Fast.
Yeah, it's wild. And he would come with that, and we thought he was the coolest ever. But he was kind of arrogant like that too. He would totally dispel all of our like ideas. And
you can't. This is not true.
Like, no, that's stupid. Yeah.
Yeah, but so like some of the most prominent. I mean, I only really got into gaming as like a hardcore hobby when the N64 came out. Like we had an NES.
Yeah, me too, bro.
Growing up, my parents didn't allow us to get the SNES, so we kind of skipped over that. We just had a few PC games here and there. Things like Math Blaster and educational stuff with like maybe once in a while mom might like give in and let us get a Star Wars game, or there's like Dark Forces or Rebel Assault 2 or whatever,
or X-Wing versus TIE Fighter,
stuff like that.
That was fun.
Yeah. But outside of that, I was like totally out of the loop until we got the N64, and that would have been about a year before we moved to Arizona and met you guys. So in that year, basically all we had was Kobe Bryant NBA courtside, Mario Kart, and it ended up being The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
Because it was GoldenEye.
Because it was originally GoldenEye. My dad made us take it back.
Oh, my parents hated that.
So I played basically that whole year was just the year of Ocarina of Time for me. That 1998, 1999 year. And so all of my friends in the neighborhood or close by also had this game and had already beaten it because it had come out. We got it late.
Yeah.
We got it Christmas 98. They had already been playing it. And so they would come over and be like, oh, you're at this part, huh? And they would like pretend they were going to spoil something or tell me something that was wrong on purpose to make me think that was it, but then it wasn't.
Yes. Dude, kids are so funny, man.
I know. And I'd be like, no, I don't want to hear it. Like, no, don't tell me. Yeah. Right? And then be like, oh, actually, like this person is actually this. And a lot of times they'd make it up just to like mess with me or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of times they would also just do it. It felt like my friends were trying to almost compete with each other to see like what secrets they could find that nobody else had found.
Right.
And so there's a few that I feel like everybody knows. Like everybody knows about, oh, you can get the rumor or the hoax that you could get the Triforce in Ocarina of Time. Like everybody heard that one. Yeah. But I think that one at least had some level of like, I don't know, like actual authenticity behind it.
In Nintendo Power, there may have been an image that was shared,
I think there was some video promotional material, which might have been screenshotted for Nintendo Power, that showed Link opening a box, and there was like Triforce pieces, like the 3 Triforce pieces inside.
I might have that Nintendo Power issue, actually.
Yeah. And so like
my parents' house.
This was actually true of Super Mario Brothers 3 too. And this is the kind of thing that would never happen today, where they have like levels, like screenshots from levels on the box art that were like beta testing levels that aren't actually featured in the game. And so that kind of thing, you'd look at that and go, I don't remember that world. That must be a secret.
Right.
And that's how those types of rumors might start.
Well, you know what's funny? This all likely begins in like the 90s when games really did have these insane, obscure, very difficult to find actual secrets in them.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, with The Legend of Zelda, you would have to bomb every wall in the entire world until you eventually find, like, oh, there's one secret. There really was, though, a legit secret cave that if you put a bomb in the right place, you can go down.
In Final Fantasy games and RPGs of that kind, where they have the
hidden secrets,
the secret
everywhere.
tunnels that are in, like, the walls of the dungeon are black. But there's like one tile in which you can slip through to like find a chest somewhere.
The Mario games, they all used to do that.
They had a lot of those.
So they kind of trained us as kids to expect that, right? And so as games started moving into the 3D, less of that was happening in 3D.
Yeah,
but it was still happening here, though.
Yeah,
it was still happening in our minds, but it wasn't happening as much in the actual game. You couldn't really just walk through a wall because that doesn't make sense in 3D all the time.
No,
but we had still been trained to expect them.
Yes.
And so we were looking for them.
Yeah. So like, the Triforce rumor, I think most people knew about that.
Yeah.
As far as like the iceberg of like video games rumors go, this wouldn't even be like beneath the surface of the water yet. This is like above the surface type of rumor. Yeah. But like one that drove me crazy was that my friend told me you could beat the Running Man in Ocarina of Time. So there's like a NPC out on the world map who you race.
Yeah.
And you end up back in Kakariko Village, kind of in that place where the bridge that leads into the actual village is.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the end of the race is. And okay, so the reality behind this is that it's programmed into the game that he beats you by 1 second no matter what you do. So you can't win. But my friend told me that he did. He beat him. This is like a first-hand account. I beat him. I figured it out. But every time I asked him, well, how? What did you do? He would say, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you how I beat it. I'm not going to tell you. You just got to figure it out yourself.
Classic.
And I believe my friend. I don't think he's lying to me. The kid was legitimately lying to me, like just making it up. Because again, I feel like there was almost a competition to see like who could find the coolest secret in the game.
Oh, you haven't done it? Oh, yeah. I did it. Yeah.
So I wasted so much freaking time. I want to say weeks or maybe even a month every day, like trying to beat this guy.
Yeah.
But trying to like just like perfectly like round that corner and not like have any slowdown. Because I had done a lot of practice, say, in the racing with the horse in Lawnland Ranch.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And, you could get pretty good at like getting a really good time on that or whatever.
Just making Luigi get super pissed over and over.
Luigi, that's right.
Luigi. He looked like Luigi.
It wasn't his
Talon?
name, but
Talon?
something like that.
There's Malin and Talon. Oh, wait. No, I can't remember the brother. I can't remember his name.
Anyways, he did look like... they looked like Mario and Luigi, though. And I do remember kids talking about that. Yeah. That was supposed to be Mario and Luigi. Because there is a portrait of Mario...
Oh, in Princess Peach's castle.
Yeah, when you look at in Zelda's castle, there's a window you can look through and you can see a picture of Mario with the wing hat.
Yeah.
And something else too, but I can't remember. Anyway, so yeah, people talked about that. But I wasted so much time trying to beat this guy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are a lot of people who also, all these rumors that came out during the time, tried to do all these ridiculous things. And I think that was probably the biggest tell about whether or not something was true or not was how many absurd steps does it take to actually do it.
Yeah.
So like Pokemon, for instance, I can't remember what this was, but there was some list of steps you had to do where you had to kill like an absurdly high number of this particular Pokemon without shutting the game off or saving. That was always a big tell to you. You can't save. Yeah, so you have to leave it on and like your battery's going to get drained after a certain amount of time. So you have to actually replace the batteries. They're not rechargeable.
Gosh. The Game Boy batteries would not last very long.
No.
Either. That was
you had to kill a certain amount. You had to go do this thing, like turn the Game Boy upside down and repeat this process a certain number of times.
That's right.
And then you'd be able to unlock one of those secret HMs, which were like the moves that would let you push rocks or do different things on the map to move the truck. In which town was it? I forget. Anyway, but there was supposed to be Mew. That's where you could get Mew in the game. Yeah. Right. And like that was a really big one that a lot of people sort of propagated in my circles. I didn't play any Pokemon games except the original Red and Blue.
Yeah, I don't think that I've played any after that.
I didn't play any of them after that. So I only really know about that one. But another one that my circle of friends were talking about was Mew 3.
Mew 3.
Yeah, you could get a Mew 3 in the game because Mew and Mewtwo are real.
Right.
But like they said, okay, Mew 3. And anyway, it was like I didn't really know if I could trust them anymore or like believe that. But then the Pokemon movie came out and they actually referenced the rumor in the movie, which actually sparked the rumor again.
It made it worse.
Because like the scientists that create Mewtwo in the movie, there's like, and Mewtwo is like in like a set of armor in that. So there's like screenshots where people are like, oh, is that like an evolution of Mewtwo to like Mew 3? But then also the scientist in the movie says, now we can begin work on Mew 3 or something like that. It's like a line from the movie.
Did they ever do a Mew 3? There's like 1,000 Pokemon.
No, I think there's like mega evolutions, which are a different thing that came way later. And I don't know nothing about it. I seriously don't. But apparently there's a mega evolution of Mewtwo or Mew or something like that where it's crazy. But anyway, that was something that was really different about the era we grew up in because I don't even think we had the internet in our house. Until Arizona. I think we got net zero.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the first time we ever had internet in my house. Now, the internet had been accessible for years before that, but my family was way behind on the adoption of technology.
We had AOL and something else before that. But yeah, we technically had it, but we really rarely used it.
Yeah. I remember for the most part, what I used it for was just
I didn't even know what to do. Yeah.
Just like chatting with you guys down the street on AOL.
Hotmail was it MSN Messenger?
Yeah, MSN Messenger.
MSN Messenger was
exactly.
And then ICQ, the internet chat query, something like that.
And then there were some like online games you could play where you could, chat with people.
Habbo Hotel, remember
yes,
that?
I do remember that.
Habbo Hotel. That was the weirdest, man. Somehow that was fun to play for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we discovered RuneScape.
RuneScape kind of replaced that.
Yeah, but we were early on RuneScape too, so that was a different game back then.
But I feel like today there's like at least as far again I'm kind of unplugged, but like gaming hoaxes are just not a thing now like they were.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe once in a while someone will do some really elaborate. Like I heard of some thing that a kid did where. It was like during Halo 3. Maybe somebody in the chat could like, if they know more about this, like spark my memory on this. But they got some video footage from like a really early Halo 3 beta something or other.
Oh yeah.
But in order to like mask some of the things that would give this away as being something like that, the kid ended up like taping that. Putting it on a videotape. Of
course. Yeah, smart.
And then putting the videotape into a VCR and then filming a CRT TV, this footage and being like, see, I got like a secret like Halo 3 something or other and unlocked this. I can't remember all the details, but like you have to go through that level of steps to be able to like fool somebody now.
Yeah.
Even a little bit.
It's not hard, or it's not easy.
It's way harder.
Yeah,
now.
like it used to be. But almost the rumor stuff nowadays it goes all the way back to like just games in development and just leaks about like what's coming. Like, because you're right, you can't really get away with it with a game that already exists. You have to like, it has to be something nobody has touched yet. Yeah. And then you say, oh, I have an advanced copy. Or, hey, this is what's happening. Oh, this news is coming. And, maybe it's confirmed or maybe not. But that's basically what it's kind of turned into, is that. It's all about the future. It's never about what you actually have that you could verify for yourself.
Here's another one, actually, I just thought about. Again, this was... I haven't actually released this part of the interview that I did with Hironobu Sakaguchi a couple of years back for Fantasian. Because we had a certain number of questions we could ask, and most of them were about Fantasian, of course. I snuck in a couple about Final Fantasy because I was still working on my redo of the retrospectives, the scripts for those. And so one thing that a lot of people have talked about, and I saw this as recently on Twitter as like, I want to say 3 years ago.
Okay.
About a Final Fantasy IV that had been in development for the Famicom, not the Super Famicom.
Oh,
and that
interesting.
Then what was called Final Fantasy V, which we know as Final Fantasy IV, was retermed Final Fantasy IV because that FF4 Famicom game got canceled. So there's this whole thing about that. So when I was doing my research on this, like it seemed like, because there was one publication, some Japanese publication, that put a screenshot of what the idea was, it was what they were thinking might come in a Final Fantasy IV. And it had like different classes, like these new classes like Baker or something like that. But awesome. they were just speculating. Yeah. It was just like, here's what we think a Final Fantasy IV might have or what might be cool. But some people misinterpreted that for being like, oh, here's this Famicom Final Fantasy IV game that's going to have these different classes and that we hadn't seen in 3. Anyway, so there's even a quote from one of like the PR people who had worked in Squaresoft as like a PR, like a public relations person. Yeah. And even she was quoted as saying in somewhere, that project was canceled very, very early on in the development. It actually didn't get very far or something like that.
I'm sure they had pitches and spec stuff that was like possibilities for future games. Yeah. Like at what point do you say, oh, they were going to do it or not? But you're going to have material like that.
Right. And so I saw people quoting that as early as, because I had already done my interview with Hironobu Sakaguchi, and I saw people talking about this on Twitter and like citing these sources for it, and people were like, I didn't even know there was a Final Fantasy IV. And I wanted so bad to say something because I had already done an interview, but I was trying to save it for this series I was going to release. But I asked him straight up, like, hey, can you tell me more about this Final Fantasy IV project for the Famicom? And he was like, I hope I'm not like ruining anything for you, but like that didn't exist. There was no such project. So either he has totally forgotten it, or
I guess that's possible.
There were talks about it that were so preliminary, so just like whiteboard kind of like sketch out of ideas that never really made it into any real level of development, that it's not worth remembering.
That's probably more likely. Yeah. Because I'm sure they had lots of ideas for games. But like at what point do you say, oh no, we're going to do this one and then it's going to be, this is what it's going to be. Yeah, they probably didn't get there. That was more than 30 years ago.
Yeah. And I mean,
so long ago.
Again, my research into the development history of Final Fantasy has revealed that they do forget a lot of things. Yeah. And they'll even like talk to each other, but like, remember funny. Like this all? I don't remember that. Like, you said this and this and this. It's like, oh, dude, I forgot. So, they forget a lot of things themselves. It could have existed, but I think if it had existed, it would have been not even a game that really saw any sort of legitimate light of day or any real development. Yeah. Just a concept or something like that. But again, that came from the fact that I could talk to him over the internet and have a translator there who could translate and like answer that question. And so, it's weird how different. But another thing I think is really different too about today, and people are talking a lot right now about a collapse for the video game industry,
something like that might be coming. Yeah, but it won't be a total collapse. I mean, I don't think there's so. Everyone has a phone now. Like there's going to be a market for this stuff in the future. But as to, gosh, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you're seeing nowadays with like Meta and the goggles and like where things are going to go. I'm not excited about that stuff. But there's a huge generation gap that's going to become obvious because like people our age are going to not want to wear that.
No.
But then people who are younger who grew up maybe more open to that stuff, they're not going to think it's such a big deal.
Yeah.
And so how do they sell to both? How are they going to sell products to both? Because the hyper generation splits are just becoming wider and wider now as things change faster and faster. But the idea of consoles just in general is a limited idea. It's not going to last forever. At some point, a console, it's just your TV. It's like my TV has like Chromecast or whatever, or it's a smart TV.
Yes.
So it just has games on the TV.
Streaming services.
The TV itself has a game.
Yeah, streaming services that
like
are just,
Apple TV had Fantasia, as we were just talking about.
Yeah.
That's going to be a hard one to get around in the future for the consoles to sell you extra stuff when it could just easily just be just play it on your TV. You don't need an extra thing. I don't know when that's going to happen. The consoles might have a little bit longer, but that's coming.
Yeah.
That's just going to be weird.
And
you have to buy a different TV. You have to buy a right brand TV to get the right games.
Or I would think it would just be an app you download onto it, like a Netflix or something like that.
Oh, that's right.
Just your Nintendo
like a gaming subscription. There you go.
And they just have a library.
I'd say in the next 20 years, something like that
could happen.
Yeah.
And they could all implement like some kind of augmented reality.
Oh, for
where
sure.
you wear goggles and you get this or that sort of feature added to it. But one thing that we have talked about a lot in the past on our older podcasts, but was just like the corporatization of the gaming industry. We started talking about it, 7 or 8 years ago, but it's more homogenized. Like it's every game is essentially the same thing.
Yeah, they're very similar.
Where there's very few genres that are popular. As far as first player games go, they're almost all open world. They're almost all including these RPG elements.
Yeah.
They almost all include like some form of like stealth where you can sneak through tall grass. Like all of like this single player, maybe narrative driven type of games have fallen into this where their budgets are so big. It's like so bloated.
They can't risk
They're
anything.
playing so safe that they're just including things that they think people want.
And things from everything. Oh, we'll get a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We need this audience, so we're going to take a little bit of the RPG elements into our game. We need this audience, so we're going to take a little bit of these elements and these characters. And they're just taking a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And then, in my opinion, they're missing. But so many games do this now, and they have bigger marketing budgets now. So they still sell really well. A lot of these games still sell fine.
There's actually just a lot of people, not even just in the gaming industry, but in tech and especially in like the media, like, media companies. There's massive layoffs happening right now in all of these
everywhere.
fields.
Yeah, everywhere.
There's all this concern about AI and how much it's going to be able to replace manual labor on these type of things.
Organized large news sites are having big layoffs.
It's like it's kind of a big concern right now.
Yeah.
But to me, it's not about AI. It's not about something like that. It is about the entire corporate structure.
Yeah.
It's about all of these really interesting creators who sort of formed these small companies.
Yeah.
That had these really cool ideas. And then at some point, they grew or expanded to where the I don't know if I want to call it pressure or temptation, maybe one or the other or both, depending on the circumstance. The pressure to become a publicly traded corporation comes around. Yeah. And as soon as that happens, it's almost like clockwork.
Yeah.
The way that it just starts falling apart. The whole cancer of like the corporate mindset on, I don't care what industry it is. You have to have grown from last year every year
forever. Yeah.
If otherwise, you ever decline, then people start selling their stocks. And so the pressure to continually grow forever, every year till the end of time is what has put us where we're at.
Yeah, sure.
And why we don't see the kinds of really exciting, different, crazy, weird, like interesting experimentation that sort of led to the birth of these franchises that now get recycled over and over and over again.
What's unfortunate is that so these indie devs that make those kinds of interesting things, I think maybe at least in part, your issue might be more along the lines of that those indie devs who make these things, they're just squeezed out of ever like being in an elevated position.
Yes.
Like they're just gonna always be indie devs making these sub indie like games. And that's fine for people in the indie scene who can know who to go to, right?
Yeah.
But it's not culture building stuff. It's not stuff that's actually going to like expand very far. It's weird games. You're not going to be able to talk to very many people about them unless you're online or something.
Yeah.
And like there's something unfortunate. Like Final Fantasy wasn't that. Or a lot of these early games you were talking about, all the kids were playing them because those were the games to play.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's like you just got to be one of the weird kids and you got to still play good games. They're there, but you're just going to be weird. And you're going to be one of the weird people playing awesome games, but not really having as many people to talk to about them.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's something that kind of isolates you. You kind of feel like you got to play the Fortnite, you got to play Grand Theft Auto, you got to do what everyone else is doing.
Yeah. So as I was, sort of this last week, and I guess even further beyond that, contemplating like what's the real difference? Because there's a whole meme culture surrounding boomer and zoomer, like old people versus the young people, which is not a new thing. I mean, that's existed forever. You get one generation that ages, sees this next generation's humor or culture and be like, this culture is freaking stupid. And then there's like, oh, but you're just old. You just don't get it, which is true.
I have a lot of very good linguistic examples of that, but yeah, it's true.
So that exists, right? But like as I'm thinking about, okay, has the culture or just sort of like the spirit of this hobby I once like was really into really changed that much? Because you still got console wars and stuff that existed then. Yeah. So like there's still certain parts of it that are there.
Well, the console wars were bred from the fact that you could only buy one because we were poor, right? Like that's what the console wars is. I'm too poor to have all the consoles.
Yeah.
And so the one I have has to be the best one.
It has to be the best
because
one.
it's the one I have. And screw you for telling me that mine sucks. Yours sucks.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's what console wars is.
It's just, sort of basic kindergarten tribalism. But but I was really serious to think about it. Like, what is the real difference? Like, the real difference. Is there one? Or am I just too old and I'm just not with it anymore?
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's going to be some part of that that's true.
Of course.
But I really do think it boils down to those two things. What has really changed the way it feels, I guess, to be involved or with a new game coming out and being a part of the crowd that's like experiencing that for the first time is how connected we are via the internet and social media. You just don't have nearly as much to weed through as far, or even to know how to beat the game. I mean, like guides existed, but you had to buy like a magazine that would like, and a lot of times even those weren't like comprehensive. They would miss things.
Yeah.
And then like the internet comes around, you get game FAQs and you get a bunch of different websites now that will post their own sort of guides on how to beat stuff. There's no mystery to it anymore. You get stuck on something, you can go find out how to beat it in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And that didn't exist. So you had to rely on your friends. And sometimes they would just totally lie to you about whether or not you could actually do something. And you waste a month trying to figure it out.
That's so funny.
So like the internet and social media has really changed it. Not only in that respect, but also in the respect that there's just a lot more general nastiness, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
Where,
totally.
People are just, because you're exposed to just way more people. So you just find.
Well, it's one thing to have that friend.
A-holes,
Yeah, it's one thing to have like the friend who comes over and is just like laughing at you because he's rich and he can afford all the games and you've got your one game and you don't play his games. But it's a whole different thing with social media. It just amplifies that stuff.
Yeah.
It amplifies all the negativity and all the nastiness, right?
Yeah.
And it's so different, in part because of social media, and really not in a good way.
Yeah.
Social media has made it so that, like, I don't know, like it's made it hard to be a kid, honestly. Especially, I don't know, like, I don't know what you'd think about this, but I'm thinking about my kids, and I'm like, no social media as long as possible, as long as possible.
I actually think that's smart. I do.
I think so too, except that their friends are going to all have it. And social media is the new video games. It's the new entertainment. And so my kids aren't going to be playing the same game, which is the game of life and being better than everyone else and showing
TikTok,
presenting everyone a life that is more perfect.
Following this or that influencer.
Yes.
And whatnot.
That's the new video game. That's kind of what it is. Maybe that's why the collapse of everything's happening, because everyone's finding that their entertainment is just their social media feed and not games, movies, news, any of that stuff.
Much. Well, certainly that's true for news. I mean, people they're not turning on their cable to go watch like
gosh,
NBC
when I moved into my
whatever.
new house, I don't know what you did, but they gave me a little package. It was like, here's the cable offerings. And I was like, throw that in the freaking garbage. I'm not paying like $70 a month for cable. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I don't do that, man. I got Netflix, I got YouTube. Like, I don't need cable.
Yeah, that's been funny for me too, because we eventually got YouTube TV.
Okay, but that's still cheaper though.
The only reason that I care about that at all is to watch sports. I don't watch anything else on it other than that, which I probably should have just subscribed to. But if you just do ESPN, then you're going to miss, because there's all other networks that have different stuff.
NBC and
So
CBS.
Anyway, that was the only reason. That's the only time I actually watch like legitimate TV anymore is for when the NFL's on or NBA or whatever.
Yeah.
And even then, I don't follow them that closely anymore. I used to be way more into it than now.
Yeah. Well, as soon as Kobe retired, I was like, I don't know. I'm not as into the NBA anymore. I haven't watched it much since.
So, basically, I would say if I were to draw a pie chart with like the percentage of time spent on what, it's probably like 85% YouTube.
Me too.
Just
guaranteed.
YouTube.com is where my entertainment comes from.
YouTube.com.
And then probably the next sliver might be like 10%, like actually sitting down playing a video game or something like that.
Okay,
but mostly that's for our podcast.
Right.
Now.
Which is for YouTube.
Whatever 5% is left over would be spent on things like social media or like watching a movie or whatever. I guess now streaming services do come into that. I do that a lot more now than I used to.
But sometimes, with like me and my wife, we'll watch stuff.
When you're just hanging out together and you just wanted to spend some time, you might watch a show. So maybe that's a little bit bigger of a piece of pie. So maybe we take YouTube down to 75 instead of 85%. But it's still overwhelmingly just watching YouTube.
There was a survey done a while ago that was like, hey, which social media site do you think is the most valuable? And YouTube by far was the winner.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. I could lose all social media, but if I can keep YouTube, that'd be nice. At the same time, well, YouTube, the comment section is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But the nastiness and the hate isn't so much the point, right? You're kind of just like on the other social media sites. A lot of it is, like your friends and your friends and people who know people who like to dunk on people all the time and get some, social points and whatnot. But for YouTube, it's like you can kind of skip all that. You don't have to read the comments, and it's not posts, and you're not seeing a dozen of them. It's just one video. I don't know.
Yeah. So, but I feel like, this is already kind of true to say Facebook. I've already abandoned that.
Yeah.
And I
haven't been on Facebook in a long time.
I'm in the generation for which like that kind of was made for.
Right,
so
that's right.
I've already jumped ship on that.
Yeah, me too,
and it's basically just like my parents who use it.
Yes,
now.
That is Facebook.
But I feel like YouTube is I'm not saying it's likely to happen, but I could see a future in which that starts to turn more towards something like TikTok.
That's already happening.
The kids
with shorts
are watching TikTok, not YouTube necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't think TikTok is all the way there yet, because TikTok is mostly just random kind of silly dance videos and memes.
The thing about YouTube is that you can find legit like advice on how to, like when my laundry my laundry machine had broke, and I was like, all right, man, I got to freaking fix this. And I'm not opening TikTok for none of that. Like I'm going to YouTube and I'm typing how to, and then I typed in the model of my machine and I saw a whole tutorial and I was able to fix the machine by myself. No social media site can give me that, just YouTube. TikTok doesn't even come close. The videos are too short.
Yes. And I think as long as YouTube has that as sort of its base or foundation, and there's no competitor trying to do that YouTube will always be very useful and will have like a strong hold kind of on the market share or whatever you want to call it.
But here's another thing, though. People also on YouTube just watch video games.
Yes.
And
like playthroughs and longer videos.
I think that has to be eating into margins for the video game companies as well, probably at an increasing rate.
Sure, because, you just watch whether or not you like it. And
even if you do like it, you're following your streamer. It feels like you're playing it with the streamer or the person playing. And so maybe you just watch them play the whole dang thing and then you never buy it. I don't know how big of a deal that is. I know a while ago game companies were complaining about that. I do think it's a problem, though, and I do think that it's only growing. It's a growing problem that at some point will have to be addressed one way or the other.
Right, and so this kind of circles back around to the two things that I feel like are legitimate. And this is not me just being nostalgic for my time or me just like you kids today, you don't know what it was like. It's not that. I promise it's not that. This is me like in good faith trying to is there really a difference? And I feel like those are the two things. It's the level of ease to access of information about it and large communities which are able to confirm or deny the validity of said information. And then also the just hardcore corporatization of certain franchises we grew up with, which is sort of pushing towards this out of control expansion rate and bubbling of the industry that is certain to have some kind of collapse.
Well,
maybe not a total collapse. Like you were saying earlier, not a total collapse,
right?
But at least we're not looking at games being made for a budget of $200 million. But
that would be a good thing.
That would be a good thing.
It would be a great thing.
A really good thing.
To drop the budget of even a great high level game to the single millions, single digit millions. And that's what...
Because a lot of the games we grew up with were very limited in terms of what they were even capable of doing. The hardware... No matter how ambitious you were, the hardware well, there's text limitations all the way up through the 16-bit era.
Totally.
There's only a certain amount of text. We had to limit how many words are in the dang game. So when you're working within that kind of frame, it forces you to be so creative to find solution to problems. Whereas, and this is something that developers who were a part of, say, Square at that time versus now, they admit themselves. It's harder to sort of get unified on a vision when, man, there's so many ways we could do this and there's so many possibilities. It's not that there are no limits. There's always a limit. But the limits are not nearly as restrictive as they once were. The amount of data they can work with is just so much higher.
Okay, I've got it. So I've got a decent analogy. I've figured this out now. So when you eliminate boundaries, the assumption is that you're going to get all kinds of crazy, really cool, different things.
Yes.
But what actually tends to happen when you eliminate boundaries is that you get a lot more of the same thing.
Exactly.
And you would think intuition would say that wouldn't be the case. But I have an example for this, at least in part. You've got something like the internet in general. Just the whole internet. Now, could you have guessed?
That's a good point.
Could you have guessed in the 90s that as soon oh my gosh, if only people could have the access of all the wisdom of the world, we'd be so much better. People would be all here and there. And what ends up happening when the internet opens up the access to knowledge of everything is that people ignore all of it and don't care.
They become even more...
And they narrowed
into their echo chambers.
The internet has narrowed people into even more refined, a smaller space than they were before, right? When they had to go to the library and read books to learn stuff.
Yes.
Right?
It's a great point.
Isn't that weird?
It's a great point.
Who would have guessed that the internet the broadening of boundaries would have led to actually a narrowing of your average person's interests?
I think that's a very, very true principle. And again, it's not even just it applies to everything. It's the less limits... As any type of creator, when you sit down and this is true, say, of painters or artists, and it's just a blank canvas, and you can do literally anything on that canvas, it's actually harder to get started.
It is.
Than if you go in with a set of rules or a
color palette.
Like, say, in an art class, where your teacher tells you you're going to paint in this style, you have to do this subject, you have to do this, and this. All of a sudden, it's much more focused, and then if I can't do that, well, how can I do this, but not this way, but so I can follow the rule or whatever, or the limit.
It's almost like beauty isn't just what can you do. There's some aspect of beauty that is like, what can you do within a certain confines?
Yes.
Within certain confines.
Yes.
When anything is possible, it becomes difficult to define, like, what even is beauty if anything's possible, right?
Yes.
But if you've got some type of frame there, then it's like, okay, you can actually work with something. And now here's the thing. Somebody who is very well practiced at painting within a frame maybe could do something pretty cool with some unlimited thing. But there are very few people who are like that. The assumption is that with the internet, everyone would become like that. No. Yeah. With the internet, everybody doesn't freaking know what to do and just follows whatever the guy next to him is doing.
Yes.
And now, here we go. Now the new boundaries are set even narrower than the previous ones.
It's almost like when the confines or the barriers are so high, somebody kind of pushes it in this way to like a certain point, and they're like, and people look at that and they kind of just follow suit.
Yeah.
Whereas if they're really, really smaller confines, you got to find all of these different ways around solutions that spark a level of creativity that you just won't be pushed enough to even, because it's hard.
No,
it's hard to think. You sit there and strain, going like, oh, how can I solve this problem? I can't do this, or this. It's like labor intensive for the mind to like work through that problem. But that's where you get breakthroughs that are legitimately like genius ideas.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're not limited, it's like, well, you're not forced to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And so everyone kind of just follows into one path.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's happened.
Well, that's so funny.
The industry.
This is almost just within the nature of what do you call it, fast food culture, or just get what you want right now, whenever you want it culture, which has been going on for probably a century now, but has really kind of reached a pretty ridiculous point now, and specifically with things like TikTok.
Beardmo puts choice paralysis here.
Yes.
This is something I saw some studies on.
Well, this happens to me. If you give me a menu with 30 things on it, I'm like, I don't know, whatever what are you having? I'll have that,
Yeah.
But if you give me a menu with like 4 things on it, like, I'll pick one of these 4.
So there was, again, I think I've referenced this now at least 10 times in this podcast, but the Vsauce series, which was originally a YouTube original.
Yeah.
Now it's available, but Minefield. They had one episode they did where they were basically exploring this whole idea. So they went out to a public place and they had this tray of like 50 different jelly bean flavors, and they're asking people to select which one they want.
Right.
And they're showing the people going, oh, like, and it's like just like totally like just. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. They're just struggling so much to like pick the thing that they want.
Because you're trying to objectively determine based on all you do, like a March Madness like calendar. Like, okay, well, what about this and this? But which one? Because you want to find the best one.
Yes.
Which is the best one of the 50 here?
Yes.
And whereas the truth is, like, it doesn't freaking matter, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a jelly bean.
Yeah.
But people get all up in a like twist. They can't figure it out.
Yeah. But what they would do at the end is then ask them, okay. But they told them you can only choose one. You can only choose one jelly bean. Which one do you want? And then they would eventually choose it and they'd eat it. And they say, okay, how confident do you feel in your choice, or do you regret what you chose? And most of the time they said, man, I think I might have wanted that one. Maybe I should have done that one instead.
Yeah.
Then they go and do the experiment again with just 2 jelly bean. Which one do you want, this one or this one?
Yeah.
And all the people were confident that they chose the right one or the one that they wanted. And so I feel like there's this kind of universal concept of like when you simplify or make the confines smaller, right? You get. I think people are much better. Like our human beings' minds are just much more able to work within that and do something that's satisfactory, or like come up with something that feels original, rather than when the canvas is left blank and there are no rules.
See, it's so funny because what you think people want is, I want no walls, no rules, right?
Yeah.
But what people really want, what people really deeply crave for, is like some structure that can help alleviate the burden of the infinite possibility of every possible choice that they could make.
Yes.
Right? There's so many choices. And you look at people nowadays, like, you know, do you want me to like put boundaries around your life and what you should or should not, can or cannot do?
Well,
my guess
intuitively
is no.
Right. But it probably would be better.
Right.
Like, I would probably have better results if so.
We don't like it. We want to rebel against the boundaries. But then when they're not there, we're like, really need those boundaries. We're lost. We crave them, right? Maybe a few people can get by without them. Actually, I wouldn't even say that. I'd say nobody can, but some people may do better than others. We'll put it that way.
Or maybe some people are a little bit better with looser confines than others who need stronger ones. But
but we all need them, but we all hate them, right? So that's weird. That's a weird position to be in. And when you're in this what I called fast food culture, I don't even know what to call it. This instant gratification, right? You just don't want the boundaries. You don't want them at all, and your first instinct is just like, oh, get rid of them because you can, right? So you just get rid of them. And then you end up just kind of following what the guy next to you is doing anyways, and you end up, not without realizing it, you've just allowed somebody else to set up new confines around you that may even be stricter, but you feel more free because at least that dude didn't tell you the boundaries. Right. And I chose these boundaries. Like, okay, fine, but they're still there.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So
the illusion of choice. That's it.
The illusion of choice.
Oh gosh, we could do a whole thing about that.
Oh, totally.
The concept that that's just weird.
I know.
That's crazy, actually, because it's interesting in a video game, but it's even more interesting when you look at like real life. It'd be like the illusion of choice.
We talked about that a little bit. We kind of
Nier, right?
Sort of. Well, with Nier and with Final Fantasy 16.
Oh yeah.
When I was talking about, I don't even know if I have a choice whether I like this game or not. It just kind of is what it is.
But you do have the illusion of choice.
But we do all of our post hoc reasoning afterwards to sort of explain to ourselves or justify why we didn't like it. But whether or not I liked it might not have even been my choice at all. But that's a topic for another day. What I've kind of come down to now that we've talked through all of this about the differences in what games were like when we were growing up versus what games are like now, it boils down to those two things. But I think one of them is actually a good thing and the other is bad. Obviously, the corporatization and ballooning of the industry is bad.
It may lead
clearly bad
to something like short term. The long term is just like death.
Yes.
I look into your future and I see only death. Long term, right?
Yes.
And that's just a fact.
Totally unsustainable.
Yeah.
Totally unsustainable. You got people making choices who have no real understanding or passion for the craft.
Right.
They're only interested in maximizing profits. And all of this is bad, harmful for the quality of games, for the creativity in what can we actually do with this.
Right.
So most of that gets explored by these small indie creators who do something really interesting, and it either goes unnoticed entirely or some investor sees that and comes in and corporatizes them and gets them all into the same problem.
And you can't avoid it though.
Yeah.
Because like money talks.
Who's going to say no to buying my little company for $5 million?
Yeah, and then they call it the golden handcuffs, right? Yeah. Like you willingly get shackled with handcuffs because they're made of gold, and then you're okay with losing all that stuff because you got money now.
Yes. So that to me is like a no-brainer bad thing. The other, though, the internet and the growing of sort of the size of the community or the number of people, in a way, I think is actually a way better thing because of what we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah,
when you have a larger group of people, you get closer to like deciphering what the median between all those opinions. We'll get closer to what the truth is.
To the truth,
Right?
Yeah.
You have some people over here saying this totally insane, off-the-wall, stupid take on something. And maybe some other people on the other side that are just as dumb, making some stupid. But like when you have a large group coming all together, you'll get sort of, hopefully, something closer to what, like, I guess the true answer or like the consensus is.
That's very interesting.
And you actually, I think better than playground kids trying to trick each other into like what
because
can or
there's only a
can't
few
happen.
people, right? And so the likelihood you're going to get a decent average is low.
Now,
because your sample size is too small.
There's pros and cons to that too. It's like you lose the sense of, I think, with how easy access to guides and walkthroughs is, you lose a little bit of that sense of exploration with a new game where you have literally no idea how to beat this. You got to figure it out, or you quit.
Yeah.
It's like the stakes are a little bit higher. It feels a little bit more intense, I guess. Whereas now it's like, oh, I don't want to beat that. I can go watch this guy do it who found some easy way that I would have never thought of to like just totally like almost like a cheat code to just like make this easy. So that part of it was better then, I feel like. But like overall, I think it's a better thing to have a lot of people able to come together and find correct information than waste your life thinking you can get the Triforce in Zelda.
Very good, very good. Well, one could search their whole life for the Triforce and it would not be a wasted life.